In human history, there are names remembered because they built a civilization. There are people honored because they sacrificed to protect the truth. But there are also names carved into the memory of mankind as a warning, not because they were weak, not because they were unknown, but because they chose to stand on the opposite side of the truth, carrying as much power, pride, and hatred as a human heart can hold. Pause for a second and think about this. In the entire Qur'an, how many people are named directly in connection with their fate after death? How many individuals does Allah describe without leaving room for doubt, without offering excuses, without giving neutral language, but instead declares openly that they will face punishment? And even more chilling, among the very few names like that, one of them is a woman. Her name is Jamil. This is not the story of a poor woman crushed by hardship or lost in ignorance. It is the opposite. Jamil embodied influence, status, and social power. She had lineage, wealth, reach, and crowds behind her. She was not a victim of history. She chose to step into a confrontation with the truth, and she lost in a way that could never be reversed. The Quran does not mention Jamil to satisfy curiosity. It does not retell her life as a tragedy meant to earn sympathy. It names her as a living verdict, a prototype for anyone who believes their power can stand higher than the truth of Allah. When Surah Al-Masad was revealed, the fate of Jamil and her husband was no longer a theory. It was sealed. But what makes this story terrifying is not only the ending. The most frightening part is the method. Jamil did not fight Islam with swords. She did not lead an army. She did not face the message through open violence. She used something far more dangerous: words, rumors, public manipulation, and fear planted into the heart of society. Before Islam was attacked with force, it was attacked through reputation. Before believers were beaten, they were isolated. And before the truth was rejected, it was twisted. Jamil understood that with cold clarity. She knew that if she could control the story, she could control the crowd. If she could destroy Muhammad's public image, she could slow the spread of that light. That is why Jamil's story is not just the past. It is a cold mirror reflecting the present. The tools she used, smear campaigns, false accusations, social agitation, turning truth into a joke, are still being repeated today with new platforms, new names, and new eras. And that is exactly why the Quran does not let this story sink into forgetfulness. Welcome to Prophetic History Explained. Here we do not just retell history. We pull back the layers of darkness behind events so we can understand why Allah raises some people and why others become an eternal warning for humanity. If even now the story of Jamil feels heavy in your chest, if it makes you wonder how a human being can go that far in pride and hatred, stay with us. Because what you are about to hear is not only about a woman in Mecca more than 14 centuries ago. It is about the nature of power, the price of arrogance, and the outcome no one can escape when they stand against the truth. And before we go deeper, subscribe to Prophetic History Explained to support us. Your support is what keeps this channel able to bring spiritual and historical stories with real depth. Stories that are rarely told fully and lessons that still echo all the way into today. Jamil did not enter history as an unknown person who suddenly rebelled. She was born at the center of Meccan power, where tribal honor defined human value and the voice of one family could shake the entire city. From Quraysh, tied to the influential Umayyad branch, she grew up in a world that taught her one thing early: whoever holds power gets to define what is right and wrong. From childhood, Jamil was used to being listened to. No one dared dismiss the words of a daughter from a major clan. People watched her with a mix of caution and respect. And that environment quietly formed something dangerous inside her. the belief that she was meant to stand above others. For Jamil, power was not responsibility. It was identity. It fused with her sense of worth until it became impossible to separate. Her marriage to Abu Lahab only reinforced it. Abu Lahab was not just wealthy. He was a symbol of economic strength and political influence inside Quraysh. His money did not only buy luxury, it bought voice, position, and fear. For Jamil, this marriage was not simply personal. It was the merging of two power lines. She was not a shadow behind her husband. She walked beside him, and in many moments she pushed him forward, provoking, directing, and shaping the course. But the real story is not the wealth. It is the psychology built beneath it. Jamil did not only love power. She feared losing it. That fear was not loud, but it burned quietly and rooted itself deep. She feared a new order where her voice would no longer carry absolute weight. She feared a society where honor would not be measured by bloodline, but by faith and character. That is why Jamil was not impulsive. Everything she did came from one deep insecurity, fear of change. In Mecca, where clans controlled the hierarchy, a message calling for equality before Allah, calling people to abandon idols and dismantle artificial ranks, was a direct threat. Jamil felt that threat earlier than most. She did not look at the world through the question, "Is this true?" She looked through the question, "What will this cost me?" When someone places personal status above truth, pride stops being a trait. It becomes an ideology. Jamil began to treat her influence as something she deserved by nature, and anyone who challenged it became an enemy, no matter what message they carried. Another key part of her mindset was social influence. She did not only have status, she knew how to use it. Among the women of Mecca especially, her words spread fast. She understood crowd psychology, how to plant an idea and let it multiply into suspicion, then into hatred. That made her believe her power was not only wealth or lineage, but the ability to steer how people think. That sense of control slowly erased moral boundaries inside her. When someone is used to the world bending around them, they begin to believe they have the right to interfere with other people's lives. Pride became her lens. Anyone who refused the old order became a threat. So when Islam appeared, Jamil did not need time to study the message. She had chosen her position already, not because she examined it and rejected it, but because deep down she knew that if this message spread, the world she ruled from the top would not survive. The most frightening part of Jamil's story is not her wealth or rank. It is that she represents a type of person that appears in every era. People who fight the truth not because they do not understand it, but because they understand too well what they would have to lose if they accepted it. And from that psychological foundation, the clash between Jamil and Islam began. Not as a simple religious disagreement, but as a survival war of an old power system against the light of truth. When Islam began to echo through Mecca, Jamil's confrontation did not look like a traditional war. No armies formed, no official declaration was made, no public battle erupted at first. Instead, a quieter and more brutal war began, where words became weapons and public opinion became the battlefield. Jamil knew exactly what Meccan society ran on. Honor, tradition, and the judgment of the crowd kept clans standing. If you could destroy someone's reputation, you could isolate them, stain them, and push them out of the community. So she aimed first at honor, not the body. She did not try to defeat Islam through logic, because logic can collapse in front of truth. Instead, she chose what grows fastest in the human heart: fear and suspicion. Whispers spread through marketplaces, courtyards, and narrow roads leading to the Kaaba. Muhammad was framed as someone tearing apart the order of the ancestors. He was labeled insane, a sorcerer, a liar. Those words did not need accuracy, they only needed confusion. Jamil understood that when a lie is repeated enough times, it starts to wear the costume of truth, even if it is empty. But words were only the beginning. She did not settle for planting doubt. She wanted an atmosphere so hostile that anyone who drew near the Prophet would pay a social price. With her influence among Meccan women, she stirred rejection, threatening anyone who still maintained ties with new believers. Business became harder. Family bonds cracked. Isolation tightened around people's daily lives like a slow choke. When that still did not slow Islam's spread, Jamil escalated. She turned hatred into physical action. Stones and thorns were scattered on roads the Prophet walked, not to kill him, but to humiliate, injure, and send a message: you are not welcome here. When the Prophet prayed near the Kaaba, the city's most sacred place, insults were done openly. Filth was thrown on him in front of crowds, a deliberate attempt to crush dignity in public. And she did not act alone. Jamil provoked, pressured, and drove other Quraysh leaders. She fed them the fear that if Islam continued, the social order they benefited from would collapse. Under that pressure, oppression became normalized. Economic boycott, social isolation, psychological violence became shared tools. This was no longer the personal rage of one woman. It became a system, and Jamil functioned like the catalyst, turning elite fear into collective action. She knew one person might endure persecution, but a community crushed by long isolation would eventually break. And that persistence shows just how deep her hatred ran. What makes it even darker is how cold her strategy was. She was not blinded by random anger. Every word and every action served one goal: make Islam look dangerous, shameful, and socially toxic. She wanted to turn light into something people would avoid. And here is where the paradox begins. The harder she tried to suffocate Islam through chaos and oppression, the clearer the believers' steadfastness became. The tactics designed to terrify people accidentally exposed the injustice of the oppressors. The honor she tried to destroy was reinforced by the Prophet's patience and the believer's character. Her war of speech and manipulation did not extinguish Islam. It exposed her side. Jamil believed that if she controlled the story, she could control history. But she forgot the basic truth. Truth does not need lies to survive, and lies cannot survive forever in the presence of truth. Out of that quiet war, the first outlines of the ending appeared. Not on a battlefield, but inside Meccan society, where the contrast between light and darkness kept sharpening. And even though Jamil would keep pushing the conflict toward a higher climax, the foundation for her collapse was already being laid. One poisonous word, one calculated act at a time. While Jamil poured her power and hatred into choking Islam from the outside, the opposite side of history carried a completely different image quietly shining. No noise, no performance, no need for defense. It was Khadijah, the woman whose presence became the strongest answer to every plot Jamil unleashed. The contrast between these two women was not wealth or rank. Both belonged to Mecca's elite. Both were respected. Both had resources. And right there, history reveals something deeper. Not all power is the same, and not all influence has the same nature. Jamil used her influence to provoke, divide, and spread fear. Khadijah used hers to protect, strengthen, and keep one man standing in the storm. When Jamil spoke louder, Khadijah chose quiet strength. When Jamil aimed to humiliate, Khadijah preserved dignity. And when Jamil believed the crowd was power, Khadijah proved faith is the only foundation that holds. That is why Jamil did not only hate Islam, she was deeply jealous of Khadijah. To her, Khadijah was not simply Muhammad's wife. She was a symbol of a kind of power Jamil could not control. Power that did not come from public influence but from inner peace. Power that did not need to attack anyone to exist. Jamil tried to weaken Khadijah not through direct confrontation but through the sharp, quiet blades of social isolation. She pushed Meccan women to turn away, warning that anyone who kept ties with Khadijah would be pushed out. If she could not break Muhammad's faith, she would at least try to make the one beside him feel alone and exhausted. But Jamil could not understand this. Khadijah did not stand on Meccan approval. She stood on absolute trust in Allah and a deep understanding of the mission she was supporting. Every insult, every contemptuous stare, every social rejection did not shake her. It confirmed to her that the path she chose was right. That steadfastness became a silent but bitter defeat for Jamil. She could poison the social atmosphere, but she could not enter the heart of someone anchored in truth. She could control the crowd's chatter, but she could not move Khadijah's character. And that powerlessness exposed the final limit of Jamil's influence. This is not just a personal feud between two women. It is a symbolic contrast. Jamil represents power built on fear, competition, and domination. Khadijah represents power built on faith, sacrifice, and dignity. One must keep attacking to hold position. The other does not need to attack anyone and still stands firm. That contrast exposes what Jamil was truly fighting. It was not only a religious message. It was a new moral standard where human worth is not measured by lineage or public influence, but by honesty, patience, and closeness to Allah. And in that quiet conflict, Jamil was already losing long before the final scene. Because while she tried to destroy through hatred, Khadijah built through steadfastness. While she believed fear could protect power, Khadijah proved only truth can protect a human being against any force. Khadijah's existence became a mirror reflecting the emptiness inside Jamil, a woman who had everything yet had no peace, who owned the crowd yet lacked inner light. And from here, Jamil's fate began to tilt fully toward collapse, not because she lacked power, but because she chose to use that power against what cannot be extinguished: truth and character. There is a moment in history after which all the resistance of Jamil and Abu Lahab no longer truly matters. Not because they stop, not because they lose influence, but because the decree comes down, and from that point on, their ending is no longer in human hands. When Abu Lahab stood before a crowd on Mount Safa and launched a public insult at Muhammad, he believed he was crushing a young movement. He believed the voice of a wealthy, influential man from the Prophet's own clan could break the spirit of a messenger calling people to something new. But at that moment, Allah answered not through debate, not through persuasion, but through revelation. Surah Al-Masad was revealed like a verdict already finished. It leaves no room for ambiguity, no space for negotiation. Wealth, influence, everything Abu Lahab and Jamil clung to is declared useless. The very things they believed would save them become proof of their failure. The Qur'an's image of Jamil is not a casual description. It exposes her essence. The one who carries firewood is not only someone who harms others, but someone feeding the fire that will destroy her own soul. The rope around the neck is not only punishment, but a symbol of bondage, bondage to hatred, to pride, to the plots she herself wove. When Jamil heard that surah being recited across Mecca, her rage could not be hidden. For her, it was not just a chapter of Qur'an, it was the public collapse of honor. The woman who once made the city cautious now became a topic of gossip, even ridicule. The thing she feared most had happened. Her power was no longer untouchable. In a frenzy of hatred, Jamil grabbed a stone and went toward Masjid al-Haram with the intention to kill Muhammad. She believed that if she could remove the man, everything would return to the old order. But Allah blinded her. The one she was seeking was there right in front of her, and she could not see him. That was not only protection for the messenger, it was a sign. When the heart is sealed by arrogance, the eyes become blind to truth, even when truth is standing inches away. From that point, everything spiraled downward. Abu Lahab, who took pride in wealth and influence, was struck by a horrific disease. It did not only torment his body, it stripped away what he valued most, people's presence. Even those close to him avoided him. He died in isolation, abandoned so completely that his body was thrown into a pit and covered with stones, as if society itself refused to remember him as someone who once mattered. Jamil, the one who pushed her husband deeper into hatred, could not escape her own ending either. After Abu Lahab's death, everything she depended on collapsed. Money no longer bought a voice. Reputation no longer offered protection. Those who once feared her now whispered her name as proof that the Qur'an's words had become reality. Historical reports differ on the details of how Jamil died. Some say she was crushed beneath a massive stone. Others say she died by strangulation with a rope. But the meaning does not change. The rope around the neck mentioned in the Qur'an became real, not as coincidence, but as confirmation that Allah's decree does not fall into emptiness. The story ends there, but the message does not. Jamil and Abu Lahab are not only two people in history. They are symbols of a mindset that always returns, the mindset that believes power can replace truth, that public influence can bend light, that hatred can stop what Allah protects. Surah Al-Masad stands as a warning for every age. It reminds us that anyone who uses power to oppress, uses speech to destroy, and uses pride to challenge the truth, even if they live in luxury today, will meet emptiness tomorrow. No one escapes Allah's justice. No one can buy it off or delay it. May Allah protect our hearts from the arrogance that destroyed Jamil and Abu Lahab. May He purify us from jealousy and hatred so we do not become people who carry firewood for our own destruction. And may He keep us steady on the path of truth even when that path feels narrow and lonely. Ameen. This story is not only for people who lived in Mecca long ago. It is for every generation, for anyone who believes they can stand above truth, for any society that allows rumors, slander, and hatred to become tools of power. Jamil becomes a warning that when the heart is sealed by pride, a person will no longer see the light even when the light is right in front of them. So the first lesson for us today is to keep asking, in the conflicts of life, am I seeking truth or am I protecting my ego and my status? Second, be careful with your words. One cruel sentence, one unverified rumor, one reckless provocation can destroy someone's honor and plant pain that lasts for years, not only for others, but for you too. And finally, remember that the most lasting strength is not crowds or social influence, but character, humility, and a sincere bond with Allah. Living these lessons today does not require dramatic moments. It starts with small choices. Choosing silence instead of gossip. Choosing fairness instead of tribal loyalty. Choosing truth instead of short-term gain. Every time we choose that way, we step farther from Jamil's path and closer to the path of those guided by light. If you feel that spiritual history stories like this do not only explain the past, but also illuminate the present, join the Prophetic History Explained community so we can explore deeper knowledge about prophetic history, timeless moral lessons, and the real meaning hidden behind events that seem long gone. And do not forget to subscribe to support us. Your presence is the strength that helps Prophetic History Explained keep bringing high-quality, meaningful, and deeply valuable videos in the episodes ahead.